Everybody, JC here with another T&I toy review. And for today's review, we're going to take a look at the new DC Collectibles 7-inch scale Arrow figure from their Arrow TV series line. Now this is the fourth figure in this line of Arrow figures, and it comes packaged in the same style of packaging we've seen with all the Arrow figures. You've got the white and green borders, you've got the window box packaging with the figure clearly displayed, you've got the Arrow logo down below. Off to the side, it's got the name of the character saying it's number 4 in the series. On the one side of the packaging, you've got a look at the character from the TV series, and then on the back, you have a look at the first 4 single box figures that were released in the line. Oliver Queen without his shirt, Canary, Deathstroke, and Arrow. All of which are now out on shelves. And then it tells us that the figures are sculpted by Gentle Giant Studios, and we have the DC Comics and the CW logos down below. Okay, so let's get this open and take a look at what's inside. Okay, so here's a look at the figure outside of the packaging. Now this version of Arrow is based on the more recent seasons when he started putting on the actual green mask as opposed to just putting the green grease paint on his face like in the earlier seasons. So as far as outward appearances of this figure, other than the mask, this figure basically looks identical to the figure they released in that box set last year. Sculpting the outfit and everything, you know, the paint ups and everything on the body itself are pretty much identical. So the only other big outwardly appearance-wise difference between the figures is they've given him an actual compound bow with this figure, as opposed to that more traditional bow that we got with the first Arrow figure. He still has the 2 separate individual arrows that he comes with. It's got the yellow and green feathers on the back, and then the black staff, and then the green arrowhead. And he comes with 2 of those. And then he also comes with a clump of arrows to fit in his quiver. So you can get the clump and like one of the separate arrows in the quiver, and then he can hold one of the separate arrows in his fingers in that right hand, just like with the first figure. The hand sculpt is pretty much identical. And then like he's got the little arrow pack on his one wrist, and he's got the little side quiver that has the non-removable arrows on his waist, and that's kind of separate from the figure. Same kind of material sculpted with the hood. Same designs. You know, you've got the lighter green line work throughout the body. You've got the black boots. So all of that is pretty much virtually identical. Again, you have the stitching on his back here and more of that kind of lighter green line work. And you've got some wash work, a little bit of wash work to kind of give it that leathery kind of look to it. So again, very similar to that first figure. Now, like with the first figure, he's got the hood where you can pull it kind of back. It's not removable, but you know, the hood is not attached to the head. So, and it does fit a little bit tighter on the head, but you can still kind of pull it back, so if you want his hood down, you can do that. Now there's no real major paint blemishes or anything on my figure, but one thing I do want to kind of note on mine that I noticed is on this hood, which is kind of made with that kind of rubber material, I do notice there's some, looks like some paint flaking on it. So, you know, it's probably just unique to my figure. So here's a look at the 2 figures. This is the Arrow from the box set based on the like first season or so, and this is the newer Arrow figure. And you can see the head sculpts are pretty similar, a little bit different. The beard is painted on a little bit differently, maybe a little bit more fuller on this figure, on the newer figure. And then obviously the mask, he's got the actual mask on this one. On this one he's got the grease, which is, you know, kind of done as a green paint. The hair is pretty much sculpted the same, and again the eyes are a little bit different. I think this head sculpt is a little more, looks a little bit more like the actor, so I think it's not a big difference, but I do think it maybe captures the actor's overall likeness a little bit better than this first figure. Okay, so here's a closer look at the new compound bow that this figure comes with, and as I said, this differs from the first bow, which was kind of a more traditional bow and arrow or bow that he came with. And I like the compound bow better. I like the detail on it. It's basically just green, army green with some black mixed in. It's got the rope that's, you know, elastic. Now, it would be kind of cool if they maybe had somehow made it so it folded up like you see it do in the TV series. And then one other thing I did notice is looking at it a little bit closely in the picture on the back of the packaging, it looks like the original design of the bow had some like camo, some black camo on it, and also had multiple strings on it, like I guess you traditionally see with a compound bow. So we only got the one string, and looks like they took out the camo. So the one shown on the back of the packaging is a little nicer looking, but still for the most part I think the bow looks pretty good, and he holds it pretty good in his hand. You know, you got to put it in his left hand, and he's got this black handle there, and you just kind of slide it in there, and he holds it, you know, again pretty good. So the figure stands at just about 7 inches exactly, if you count to the top of his hood. He's essentially the same height as that first figure, so there's really no difference in scale between, or size between the two figures. And then just for one more size comparison, here he is next to Canary, the Canary figure, and you can see he's a bit taller than she is. Not by a whole bunch, but he is a little bit taller. So articulation on this figure is pretty much the same that we saw in that first figure. Now, the other difference between this figure and that first figure, I think, is this one seems to be a little sturdier. The construction of it seems to be a little bit better, especially here in the leg joints, and I'll show you when we get to that point. But there does just seem to be a little bit better construction with this figure. So outwardly, it pretty much looks the same, but the joint construction and, you know, the actual articulation is pretty much the same, but just like the joint construction itself seems to be a little bit better on this version of the figure. So the head is on, you know, a standard ball hinge joint. Now, like with the first figure, you know, when you're turning the head, if you've got the hood over the head, then the hood doesn't actually turn. So, you know, he does kind of end up looking into the hood unless you pull the hood back. But the actual head itself does have a pretty good range of motion. He's got, you can look left and right. And again, if you want, you can pull that hood back. And, you know, again, that gives him better motion, and then you can see he can look up and down pretty good, and he can kind of pivot to the right and pivot to the left. So good movement with the head overall. Now the hood itself, which comes, you know, kind of attached down over his chest, you know, that's all one piece, and again, the construction on this seems to be sturdier. It seems to be attached more solid to the figure, so it doesn't, like on the first Arrow figure, it actually kind of came unattached from the figure. It was just glued on, and it's come unattached. Whereas on this one, you know, I suppose over time it could come unattached, just like on the first one. But it just feels like it's on there sturdier. Arms are attached with a standard ball hinge joint, so he can get his arm out pretty good, and he's got good rotation. He's got the single hinged elbow, just like on the first figure, and he does have the swivel at the elbow, and then he's got the hinges on the wrist and the swivel on the wrist, so he can turn his wrist, and he's got the good up and down movement, which helps some with the bow. I would have, you know, with these bow, you know, for these bow and arrow wielding characters, I would like to have maybe seen double hinge joints just to kind of give a little bit better poses for shooting and, you know, the bow and arrow, but still for the most part the movement's not too bad. He's got the midsection joint, just again like on the first figure, and so he's got swivel there at the waist. He's got a little bit of up and down movement, more back than forward. He does not have swivel at the waist. And then here, this is probably the area where I think the construction on the joints are a little bit more improved over the first figure. These are standard ball joints that they've used, and it seemed they're definitely tighter, and there's less gappage between the actual leg piece and the waist. on this one it was more of a hinge joint than a ball joint that they used, and so and on mine at least, there's been some major separation between the leg and the waist piece on the figure, so, and the joints are just much looser on it, and we're kind of like that right away. So yeah, I don't know, it just seems to me the construction is a little bit different, and you know, again, it is actually different because they use actual ball joints on this figure, and they're not the clear joints, so they seem pretty sturdy. Now, I wouldn't recommend doing the splits any more than this on the figure. You could probably push it up a little bit more, but I wouldn't really recommend it. He can get his leg forward about that much, and then he can get his leg back about that much. He's got a single hinged knee, and he's got swivel at the knee, and he can bend his knee about that much. And then he's got swivel at the boot cuff, and then he's got the up and down ankle pivot movement, so good movement at the ankles. And then he's got one peg hole on the bottom of his foot. And just to be clear, on the wrist, on the articulation on the wrist, the hinge on the left hand where he holds his bow is like at his palm, whereas on his right hand it's at the top of his hand, so he's got the up and down movement on the right hand, and then he's got the kind of forward and back movement on the left hand. Okay, so that's my review. Overall, I like this figure. Now, you know, again, this figure looks very similar to the first Arrow figure that they released. So if you haven't picked that one up, then I definitely, you know, and you were choosing between the two, I would definitely recommend this new figure. It definitely looks better. I think the face sculpt is a little bit better. I just like the mask over the grease period. I like the compound bow, and the joint construction is just a little bit sturdier in my opinion on this one than on that first figure. Now, if you've already spent the money on that first figure and you're debating on whether it's worth buying a second Arrow figure, to me I would say it's probably worth it. But you know, again, if you've already got that first Arrow figure and you know it's not that, you know, the differences are minor enough, you know, it may not be worth, you know, plopping down another $25 for. But again, I do think, you know, just a flat comparison between the two, this is the better figure. It looks better, it's just sturdier, and I think the bow, the compound bow, looks better as well. So that's my review. This figure is out on shelves now. It hit comic and specialty stores today, so you know, if you want to add it to your collection, you should check with your local comic book shop and see if they got it in. And that's my review. As always, we ask please leave a comment, let us know what you think. There is a full gallery of images for this figure over at toynewseye.com, so there's a link in the description below for that. And like the video if you're so inclined, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. And until next time, I'll catch you later.